welcome back to my channel. If you don't know who's B, it's your girl KylerB coming at you with a new video. So today I'm going to be talking about, the Odyssey by Christopher Nolan. If you don't know about the Odyssey, like you haven't read Homer's Odyssey or even Percy Jackson or even know a little bit about Greek mythology, this is basically the Odyssey. But I watched the Odyssey, this past weekend, and definitely, it was very interesting. I would definitely say it's very much up there with Christopher Nolan's films. Would I say it was the best Christopher Nolan film? No, but it was up there. It was a really good film. So in this film, The Odyssey, obviously is about Odysseus and his journey home after the Trojan War or whatever. So essentially, Christopher Nolan's depiction of the Odyssey, essentially, how he put his little spin on it. Essentially, they have, Odysseus. It's been almost 20 years he's been away from, Ithaca, with son and Penelope. So essentially, since he's away at war, his wife Penelope is basically left in their castle, whatever, having suitors. Because they're like, okay, since he was the king, basically there's suitors waiting for her to get hand in marriage and take over. But because she hasn't chosen anybody in the past how many or so years, they're just basically living in her castle for free. And essentially it's because of Zeus's law. So Zeus's law essentially is to treat people how you want to be treated, with kindness, hospitality, whatever. So and basically always treat a stranger or a beggar or a homeless person with respect, because they might be a god in disguise. So essentially this is all Greek mythology, whatever, ancient Greek, Rome, all that. So essentially, we're not even going to dive into the Greek mythology, because essentially Greek mythology really is kind of just chews and bites off of religion. So essentially, because that whole, be nice to, a stranger or beggar because they might be a god in disguise, is basically be nice to anybody because they might be an angel, a blessing in disguise, essentially. So, with that being said, Odysseus is away. He's, lost after war. It's been 10 years to get through the war, and some people made it home, but Odysseus, he's actually stuck on Calypso's island, and he's obviously eating the lotus flower, and the lotus flower is he's forgetting stuff and stuff like that with Calypso. But essentially, this depiction of the Odyssey was actually, having Odysseus kind of regret his decision, or regret tricking, using the Trojan horse to win the war. Because when we actually get into the meat and potatoes, because it really comes full circle with this movie, basically for the first 2 hours of the film, we're basically getting Telemachus's basically point of view of learning about his father. He doesn't know about his father. He doesn't even know what he really looks like in his old age, because his father left when he was very young. So he's basically going to obviously he's a young kid, he's getting a little bit of training, but he can't take off a whole bunch of suitors by himself. So, and obviously since Odysseus has been gone, there's people who turn coats. They're not really loyal anymore to Odysseus and his family like that. Even the maidservant who works for Penelope is basically telling on her to Antonius. So basically from Telemachus's point of view, he learns that how the war even happened is that with Armageddon, let me stop. All these names are very whatever, but basically he learns how this war even happens is that the people who was on his crew, on Odysseus' crew, is that he had a little lottery. So essentially he had these little stick things or whatever to pick people with the lottery. So Antonius and this other guy, Sigmund or whatever, Antonius was trying to he paid him or try to switch and try to fight in the war. But they told Antonius stay back and just watch over, his family. And, let the other one, Sigmund, actually, do the war. So the thing is that we learn later on in the movie is that Antonius, Robert Pattinson's character, because this is easier to really say, because all these different Greek names is kind of okay. But yeah, we learned that Antonius essentially and his family did not look after Sigmund's family at all. They left them broke and destitute and basically had them off in the war while he's over here living up in the king's castle eating off their food, and basically his father died broke and destitute. So I'm just like, okay, this was the trade. The trade-off is that I fight in the war while you look after my family, and the fact that you didn't even do none of that is crazy. So that's what essentially that happens later on, that we find out later on, which is like, it really, we're working our way backwards, and it like really, the last 40 minutes of the film is like so peak. Like he like Christopher Nolan really ate that last 40 minutes. But basically we're learning about Odysseus a little bit from, you know, his point of view, from, you know, Telemachus's point of view, because he's going through all the crew people who like was basically at war with Odysseus, and trying to find out the truth. So he actually finds some guy named Melicus, whatever. He's like married to, I think, Helen of Troy, whatever. He's married to her, and obviously we see her face, and basically the face that launched 1,000 ships. So essentially she has a twin sister, and her twin sister was married to, I think, Armageddon or Armagon, whatever his name is. He like this big dude, and essentially he went to war, and basically he just wanted a reason to fight in Troy. So what he did was sacrifice his daughter, and basically his wife, when he went to war, took another lover. So when he came back from the war, his wife basically laid in wait and basically killed him, and that's how he died. He just wanted a reason to go into the war. So we basically find out the whole situation of how, as soon as Odysseus got, you know, the gates of Troy open, that was when everything broke loose, seriously, because it was basically, they won the war, but it was like really a slaughter. And essentially with that being said is that Odysseus, using a trick of the Trojan horse, and him basically like him and his like crewmates and everybody stuffing themselves in the horse, because when we get to the basically the pinnacle of like the climax or rising action of the film, essentially, where, you know, Odysseus is talking, he does like some type of like offering, he kills like 2 goats or whatever to talk to the dead in Hades. So from the dead in Hades, we see everybody who was in the war basically rise up and speak. So we see Sigmund's character, Elliot Page's like, you know, character, basically said like, you know, I died for your lie. And essentially his lie was the trick of the Trojan horse, because he was like, why didn't you tell me that, you know, you were still in the horse, or you were there? He was like, that was the whole point. They needed to trick everybody that, you know, to get into the gates of Troy. So they dragged the horse to Troy. It was like, that was like, you know, and the horse smelled. They were saying that, you know, 2 people died in that horse. They peed and all that and everything like that for days just in the horse. Like they really had to do all that. And basically he died for a lie, because he was like, oh, it's a gift for Edema. So when the whole, like, they're in Troy and they basically won the war, all that manslaughter, they were killing people left and right just for nothing. And essentially that senseless killing that happened really broke Zeus's law. And then essentially when they cut Adena's statue's head, because it basically resembles, you know, basically the temple priestess, you know, person who they like literally beheaded. So Athena, who's played by Zendaya's character, she's basically takes form of the girl that they beheaded in the film, and essentially, you know, she's like talking to Odysseus basically like about his on his way home. So with all that being said is that, you know, Odysseus basically has survivor's guilt, and obviously he's basically like trying to like, you know, realizing like, you know, maybe his like his one trick or his trickery that won him the war maybe set off like the destruction of, you know, the Bronze Age and stuff like that. And that's what really broke Zeus's law and have like the world what it is now. So essentially that's a depiction. Even though like when we read the Odyssey, we don't see Odysseus having guilt over using the Trojan horse like that. Everybody's like happy that he used his trickery. Like obviously because Athena's about wisdom and like being wise. Like you don't really get that type of description. Like, oh, Odysseus like is feeling some type of guilt or remorse for using that trick and blah blah blah. But the fact that Nolan's basically saying like, oh, this one man who has this trick with the Trojan horse, like he basically set off this age of like destruction and everything like that. The whole sea people situation, like, you know, people think like, oh, the sea people is Odysseus' crew. His crew was basically causing destruction to all these different cities and towns and killing people for no reason. And like he really set off, like him winning the Battle of Troy essentially caused all this destruction to the Bronze Age, and that's what really set things off. And that's what like basically saying like, you know, this one man's, you know, trick changed the whole world for like the worst essentially. So with that being said, Odysseus, he got home, of course, obviously, you know, the Odyssey, Percy Jackson, you know, this happened to my friend Percy Jackson. You know, Percy Jackson did this in like a week's time. But when the Polyphemus, that was crazy, because even when they stabbed him in his eye, Odysseus still said he's gonna shoot him with an arrow. I'm like, okay, Odysseus, like you already stabbed him with a fire, like a hot, like fork, torch, whatever, and you still decided to really throw a arrow in his eye. Like, please, like, come on. Like, even his crewmates were like, he's the son of Poseidon, like you really, like, you know, like messed it up. But then also when they were trying to get through, and he's like said like, oh, the sun gods, you know, you're going to the sun gods town, and they said don't eat anything, da 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 da, they still decided to eat the barbecue. He told you don't do that because you're gonna die. They still decided to eat. They're like, oh, we're good. They all died. You know, Odysseus lived because that's what the prophecy said. And then obviously, you know, he got sent to Calypso's island. You know, Calypso had him there for over 7 years, so he's been there for been at war for 17 years or whatever. Comes back because Calypso finally says like, okay, you know what, let me help you remember like why you're truly here, like what's going on, like you have a family, you have a kid. So she gets back home, and obviously, you know, the gods, Poseidon and Zeus, they not too fond of, you know, Odysseus. So he got to go ragtag, come home. He gets home back to Troy, or he gets home back to Ithaca. And then obviously, I think, is it Armageddon or Argamian, whatever his name is, he basically told him when he, like, they were talking to Hades or whatever, he basically told him like, when you go home, wear this cloak, or like, you know, don't come home, you know, like receiving flowers and everything like that, because, you know, people can lie in wait and try to kill you. You know, come home as a beggar, whatever, because you basically got to scope the scenery out before you really come home. You've been gone for almost 20 years, like nothing's the same. So he comes home. He basically Telemachus doesn't know what he looks like, doesn't know him for real, and obviously, you know, meets Penelope. Him killing all the suitors, like he ate that. But obviously him finding out that they were trying to like plot a coup for his son and try to kill his son, and he basically like burned the temples, like that also was like a big thing. Also Cersei, like obviously, you know, Cersei was crazy, but Cersei also had like a point, because the sea people, his crewmates, were really pigs in disguise. Like when she said go back to your disguises, she ate that. Like, I mean, Cersei is crazy, but she ate that. She did eat that. So yeah, like once I saw them eating that food, like that was probably like one of the grossest scenes, besides like the, you know, Polyphemus eating the soldiers, but that was gross. Then, you know, obviously Antonius and the other guy, I don't know who the other guy is, but the guy who spit his food out and into the plate that Odysseus was holding, that was crazy work, because aren't you supposed to, you know, Zeus's law? They're basically here for Zeus's law, eating up Odysseus' food under Zeus's law. But you decide to spit out food that you're already eating into a plate and said, oh, here you go. Like, what? Like, what are we talking about? That was crazy. And then also with the fact that, you know, Penelope, she ate that. She was like, only one guy could shoot an arrow through 12, you know, things. And, you know, they try to get all these other guys to do it. None of them can do it. Antonius thought he's slick. He's talking about like, oh, we can never do that, so you gotta pick one of us. And then the beggar beggar Odysseus decide like, oh, you know what? Let me try it. He tries it, strung his bow, and the strunging of the bow basically goes back to him saying like, you know, he likes to let his prey knows that he's coming for them. Like, he wants to be fair. He like gives them a chance to run away, essentially, like that, essentially. So when he strungs his bow, lets them know like, I'm here, I'm Odysseus. And then when the guy was like, you're Odysseus, and they shoot him, yo, he shot him so clean, because I'm just like, yo, that was peak. And then after he did all of that, he got all the suitors up. Telemachus was like, what's one more beggar? Like, oh, he ate that, because he's like, yeah, my father's here, my father's home. Like, he ate that. And then also, it was a really good little adaptation. I would say like the last 40 minutes really what made the movie. Also with like the whole journey from, you know, going from like town to town or city to city was actually pretty interesting too. But yeah, definitely, Nolan definitely ate that. I would say the strongest, basically, you know, actors in this film was obviously Matt Damon. Anne Hathaway did her thing, because she was like, they're like, do you want war, do you want peace? She's like, no, I want Odysseus. Like, okay, she ate that. Also, John Legumzo. I don't even know these people's names, bro. But John, the blind man, you know, I know who he is, but like his last name, I forgot. John, his acting, he ate that, because he really did his 1-2. Also, I would say another actor who really did their 1-2 in this one would have been, yeah, it's Ann, Matt, and Rob. Rob did his big one with Antonius. He did his thing, I would say. But anyway, guys, it was like basically me just chatting about the Odyssey. I would probably do a little more, you know, analytical, you know, review later on. But this is just me chatting. But anyway, guys, if you like this little 1-2 review of the Odyssey, like this video. If you comment down below, let me know your thoughts, comments, concerns, subscribe to the channel, subscribe. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. Peace.